How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees. We got the final of a three-game series against the San Francisco Giants coming up in about 2 hours, and some big lineup changes for this Yankee team coming off the loss yesterday. Unfortunate bullpen kind of fell apart. Some individual good performances, and of course, Clark Schmidt fell apart in that fourth inning. As we discussed in the pregame yesterday, Clark Schmidt's either one of those guys that's like, he starts really slow and gets a little bit better as the game goes on, or he starts strong and around the fourth, fifth inning, it just all falls apart. He just kind of looked like he ran out of gas and he just wasn't able to locate the ball. Maybe, the lineup got through like second, third time and they just started to realize where those pitches would be. They made some really good in-game adjustments and took advantage of that. But ultimately, the Yankees have a new face on the mound today, and Johnny Brito has never made an MLB appearance before, but he was tremendous last year in AAA. We're going to give you some insight into Johnny Brito, what we expect from him today, and of course, the changes in the lineup, some big ones, some really, really interesting moves that manager Aaron Boone and the coaching staff have implemented, especially with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa starting in center field today. So we'll definitely have a good reaction for you there. Take a look at why they might have done that, what the reason is, and Aaron Hicks, falling by the wayside, and they're really not utilizing him that much to start the 2023 regular season. But Ryan, before we dive into it, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great. As you mentioned, yesterday I felt like, the Yankees scored enough to win that game. And as you mentioned, the pitching just wasn't there. I will sit here and say, first and foremost, I do think that like Brito, if you compare him to Herman and Schmidt and those guys, he's probably the quote unquote least talented in terms of like having a flashy arsenal or whatever. But in terms of, the ability to suppress BABIP, the guy I have like a weird sense of confidence in to be a quality major league starter. I have a decent amount of faith in Johnny Brito. There are a lot of like weird comparisons with him and Jordan Montgomery in terms of what they were at the minor league level before debuting. Montgomery was a year younger than Brito when he debuted. He was 24. Brito just turned 25. But the stark similarities are the strikeout to walk numbers were literally the same. Like it was 0.2% different over their last 2 years before getting promoted to the major leagues. Their whip was 1.13 versus 1.17, and they both had a sub 300 BABIP allowed. So, these are guys who relied on, not a lot of walks, not a ton of strikeouts, but getting strikeouts at a league average clip, getting ground balls, not giving up hard contact. And while that's definitely a departure from what what you're used to with the Yankees, you think Carlos Rodon, Luis Severino, Garrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, big strikeout arms. That's not Brito, but I think that kind of might work for him because he's got a really good changeup. His sinker's a plus pitch. His curveball's a plus pitch. He's added velocity. We've seen him go out and not put up impressive strikeout numbers, but still have really good outings. I think that could play well against a Giants team that isn't particularly fast, so you're not worried about batted balls, kind of dropping in and then getting an extra base out of it. If you play strong defense, if you play tight defense, you're going to do fine. And the big key here today is, obviously IKF in center field, right? I know that that's the big thing for everyone. Ross Stripling has reverse splits. Stripling in his career has a .463 slugging percentage against right-handed batters, and against lefties, it's under 400. So, on base percentage, 307 for righties, 277 for lefties, batting average, 268 for righties, 225 for lefties. So I guess the idea was IKF's a righty, Aaron Hicks is a switch hitter, he's going to bat from the left-handed side. IKF is probably the better matchup. It makes sense too. Stripling's a guy who relies on his fastball and his changeup. And for those who aren't aware, that's vertical deception, and that plays better against left-handed pitch batters from a right-handed pitcher than it does against right-handed batters. So it's going to be tough for Stripling to find that put-away pitch because that's his changeup, and changeups just aren't effective strikeout pitches right on right usually. So I think it's obviously a risk to take defensively because I don't know what IKF is in center field. But from an offensive standpoint, I think it's the decision that makes, weirdly enough, the most sense. He also can put the ball in play. So I think this team is putting out an abnormal lineup. You have a rookie on the mound, you have IKF in center field, but I kind of feel weirdly confident about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of like one of those lineups you'd see in the spring training game. Be like, oh, okay, like we don't expect to see this in the regular season, but IKF in center field, I want to have a discussion there regarding, the reasoning behind it, because Aaron Hicks is the true and tried option, obviously a lot more experienced. But his game has deteriorated, and it seems like the Yankees have kind of lost faith and confidence in him. IKF being a bit more of a contact hitter, obviously. Only got on base at about a 31% clip last year. I think Hicks was around 33%. So the difference there is marginal. As you kind of referenced in a tweet this morning, the WRC plus is a difference of 5, so it's not really a big difference there. I think there's two perspectives to follow. Either they're trying to get IKF reps and experience in center field to boost his value, to continue to like kind of build this portfolio of, he's a utility man. He can play here, he can play there. We'll trade him, and maybe he'll have value somewhere else for a team, and they can see that he can play multiple positions. Or they literally are convinced that IKF is a good depth piece that can be kind of this rotational one, and they want Oswaldo Cabrera starting in left field at all times. And then, IKF just kind of transitions into this kind of utility role. He can play third base, he can play short, he can play in the outfield. Where do you see this kind of going? Because I definitely didn't anticipate seeing IKF starting in center field in an actual regular season game for the Yankees in the Bronx. I don't think many people did. But, until Harrison Bader gets back, they're just trying to give some guys some days off, trying to get guys involved. Obviously, IKF can help kind of mitigate fatigue before he's ultimately traded, if that is the direction they go. But do you think the narrative's changing a bit? Do you think that IKF's position on the team is more cementing, or do you think this is more of a value-boosting alignment in center field?
I think the Yankees just have an abundance of position players and can do really weird things with their position players. They can make Aaron Hicks a very niche player and just have him play against left-handed pitching because they have the depth to do it, right? Weirdly enough, by accumulating a lot of position players and some of them that people do not like, they can do a lot of really weird things like this, which is platooning IKF and Aaron Hicks in the outfield. In my opinion, the Yankees need to just chase offense with their lineups. They have enough personnel that can play good defense at enough positions that they can do things like, hey, IKF, go play center field because it's a marginal advantage offensively. I'll take the marginal advantage offensively. It's not like Aaron Hicks is a great defensive center fielder anymore. His numbers have graded out poorly out there. So, you're kind of feeling like, all right, if I'm going to have a guy out there who isn't going to be a great defender, I'll see what I have in IKF, and then I'll hope I get the offensive advantage I'm looking for here. If IKF just has one single today that results in any run creation in the slightest, it's a win. The Yankees have made that decision is going to look really smart. And I'm not sitting here and saying IKF's going to have a big day or is like a good hitter or anything like that, but the point really is that you want the better offensive matchup for your guys, and you feel like Hicks versus a guy who's got a good changeup like Stripling just wouldn't be favorable, right? Yesterday I felt like that wasn't even Hicks's fault that he struck out. I feel like there were a lot of poorly called strikes in that count, and that's what I'll leave it to. End of the day, if you have, you're going to have Higashioka in there, you're probably going to pinch hit Hicks for him at some point in the lineup. You could also pinch hit for IKF at some point in the lineup. That's an avenue right there if a lefty comes in and you want Hicks from the right-handed side where he's shown a lot more power. Ultimately, as I said, you have an abundance of position players. You could do a lot of really weird things with platoons when you have so many position players. And I'm all for the Yankees just trying new things, right? Just not being the same team they were last year, I think is a good thing, right? Trying to be different, trying new things, trying to, break out of this idea that, it takes a while for you to try to make any changes to your roster. I think all of those things are positives. These are things they just wouldn't do last year. Last year, Aaron Hicks would be playing all 3 games in left field. Cabrera might have gotten his first start today. Volpe would not have made the roster, right? This is a change in philosophy, and I'm going to take that as a positive.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. And, Hicks's role has kind of diminished, to say the least. And you kind of mentioned how he's going to be more of a specific, a strategical player that you're using in, specific scenarios, which is a lot different than, force feeding him reps in the outfield and consistently giving him at-bats. And the Yankees are siding with youth now, looking for potential with Oswaldo Cabrera, who finally got on base yesterday after striking out 4 times in the first game. But you mentioned the umpiring and the bad strikes. What is it with the last 2 games? I mean, it happened to the Giants too on multiple occasions where, there was some really bad kegs and there was some really bad calls that were obvious balls that were called strikes. It's almost like they're doing it on purpose, that everyone's kind of getting on board with the robo ump, in the future, whenever that might be. But it's just I don't think I've seen such bad umpiring. And usually, you Angel Hernandez, you have the main guy that's really bad and everyone knows this. But we've been getting some consistently every day. It just feels like it's terrible or it's getting worse. How do you react to that? What is your take on the umpiring and the calls being so the strike zone is expanding apparently, and they're giving them a lot more leeway to call these strikes, but it's impacting games. We saw it yesterday with the Donaldson. I mean, I know Donaldson kind of set himself up to get struck out there because swung at that pitch that was so obviously outside. But at the end of the day, those calls change the momentum of games. The Yankees may have won that game. They may have continued going and producing runs and taking an advantage there. But instead, the umpire affects that with an obvious human error, which the elements should be criticized.
Yeah, I don't like officiating affecting any sporting event. I'm not one of those people who thinks like umpires are worse than they've ever been. I think they're better than they've ever been, but there's no accountability. When let's say for example, let's use like I don't know, IKF, right? IKF made an error, and that was the Brian Hoke tweet. He made an error behind Garrett Cole in spring training, and then he was kind of effectively removed from the shortstop job. When you don't do your job correctly, you lose playing time. You don't play. You don't keep that job. Typically, someone else steps up and replaces you. And this is something that doesn't just apply in sports. This applies to any profession, except for umpiring. If you're an umpire and you are bad at your job, you get to keep doing your job. And I don't think that you should get I don't think you should get suspended for one call. That's stupid. I don't even think you should get suspended for two bad calls. But I think you have to be able to hit a certain threshold season to season, where if you're not calling strikes at a certain accuracy, you have to have your performance evaluated. Like we have public data that allows us to evaluate umpires. There's that umpire scorecards guy who I think does a great job at this. But end of the day, right? Organizations that evaluate performance. I can tell you for a fact, the Yankees do an end of year analysis for all their players and go out and have their players understand what they did poorly and have them try to correct that. For example, Oswald Peraza's plate discipline, the Yankees flat out told him he had to correct that, and he made it a point of emphasis. For umpires, that isn't really the case. You kind of just go out there, umpire, you don't really get an evaluation on your performance. Things like yesterday, things like even that first game, those are just not calls a major league umpire should be making. I don't know if you remember that strikeout in the first game of Cabrera, his fourth strikeout. That pitch should never be called a strike. Maybe in Little League, maybe when you're trying to expand the strike zone because your 8-year-old son can't throw strikes, right? That's when you expand the strike zone. Not when there are professionals on the mound who make millions of dollars and know exactly what they're doing and know how to play baseball, right? This isn't a kid's game. This isn't, some fun this isn't some family fun, right? This is a real sporting event. Treat it as such. I don't understand how umpires keep getting away with these calls, man. I really don't.
Well, think about it from this perspective, right? Like there's 150 pitches a game, maybe more than that sometimes. And that's just from one side. So maybe you're looking at like 300 total pitches a game, and their success rate for the past 2 days is 89%. You're missing like 20 or 30 calls there. You know what I mean? More than that, you're missing like 30, 35 calls. That's a freaking ton of calls to miss. That's a lot of human error. You know what I mean? At 12% human error, like 2 or 3% would be like good, like really good human error. You're talking about like corners. You're talking about marginal misses. But when you're talking about a 12% human error, that's determining the outcome of games. That's determining the flow and momentum of a scenario. Whether it's, and they probably cough it up as like, it helps both teams, But any given day, it could be one-sided, coincidentally. It could be one-sided this way, and that team is getting screwed. If it was an even split, if you had a 12% human error and it was split 6% on that side and 6% on that side, you could be like, okay, you know what? It's fair then. It's a fair human error. We can justify that. But the reality is it's not. It's going to be one-sided no matter what. It's never going to be a perfect even split. It's going to be 8% towards the Yankees. It's going to be 8% towards the Giants or any other team out of the 12%. And that's going to impact a game. It's going to impact everything. So when you look at like the full impact of that marginal human error, it's going to be a net negative for every team because it's probably going to be hurting most teams more than helping them. But you know what? I just don't really get that. But some new news that just kind of dropped a couple minutes ago with Aaron Hicks. Aaron Boone did say that Hicks is going to be in the lineup the next couple of days. So I'm curious to see kind of how that develops. I imagine that means Stanton's DHing, and I imagine that means Hicks is probably playing in center or right, and Judge goes back to right field and Cabrera in left field, or, at least until Beta returns. But so it seems like they do have some sort of strategy in play. It seems like getting IKF in there for one day seems like more of a test than anything else. My only question with that, though, is that why put out a weaker, conceivably, lineup? I guess they wanted, the right-handed pitcher there, but a right-handed batter, rather, with some more contact. But what's the justification for putting in a more, risky batting order, a more risky lineup when you have a fresh, Johnny Brito on the mound who has no MLB experience? Don't you want a stronger lineup or a stronger, more experienced bunch to support a guy like Brito? Or do you think that doesn't really matter? Maybe they just want their best lineup with their best pitchers. They're just kind of using this as more of an experimental game.
Yeah, no, I legitimately just think it's a platoon thing, right? I just looked up Taiwan Walker's numbers, who he's projected to start on Monday against the Yankees. He is bad versus left-handed hitting, and then the guy after that is Matt Strom, who's a left-handed pitcher. And as I discussed, there was a comment made, I believe, right before opening day, or maybe it was the day after opening day, where they had mentioned Hicks's role is going to be, you're going to see him a lot versus left-handed pitching. These two games actually perfectly line up with this theory that the Yankees want Hicks to be, or they want to utilize Hicks and IKF in matchups that are more, that play to their strengths a little bit more. Again, they have the depth to do it. These are two players who aren't necessarily world beaters offensively, and you kind of want to put them in situations where you feel like you can get the most out of them. If you get 200 plate appearances from IKF this year, but it's a 90 WRC plus and good base running, and the defense is acceptable in the outfield, and obviously he's got infield utility, that's a win. That's probably the best utility infielder the Yankees have had in a very long time. For Aaron Hicks, I think the bar for success would be league average offense and just continuing to be a good base runner and playing good corner outfield defense. Again, these are, you're not expecting the world out of these guys. You're just expecting them to perform in their roles very well. If those roles are limited, that's fine. They can certainly do these limited role things for a while. And when Bader comes back, their roles are going to be even more limited. So taking advantage of these opportunities and showing that they can perform in these very niche roles is going to give the Yankees a lot of information early on, a lot of utility early on. This team's bench seemingly looks weak, but I don't think it is. So at the end of the day, you get to learn a lot from this lineup today. And I think that's at least something to know. And as you mentioned, Johnny Brito's on the mound. He's a rookie. He's young. He's going to be, someone you anticipate is going to have some jitters, but I think he's just going to go out there and throw strikes. I mean, that's what I know from Johnny Brito. Johnny Brito goes out there and he throws strikes. And if he just does that today, I think he's going to have a lot of success.
Awesome, man. I definitely am curious to see how this kind of lineup performs today. But guys, I'd love to hear perspectives below on the IKF to center field situation, the Hicks situation, Johnny Brito, your confidence in him. Always happy to hear your perspectives down below in the YouTube comments. As always, make sure to like and subscribe. Enjoy the game today. Hopefully we get a dub, and we'll catch you guys a bit later on for the post-game show.